Hi guys. I hope you all had an awesome spring break. I know I did. This one was definitely different than it normally is, so we didn't really do too much. I spent a lot of time relaxing and spending time with my family, but I wanted to hear a little bit about yours. So your writing activity is titled How I Spent My Spring Break. You're going to go into where it says written by, double tap, and actually the cursor goes in the front. Just kind of move it to where you need it to be, and then start with a space, and then make sure you write your name. And of course, you are important people, so you should have a capital letter for your first name and for your last name. The second slide you really have to pay attention to because it has all the directions and reminders. So the directions say, write a paragraph about your spring break. I know that things were much different this year, but you can write about how you slept in. Maybe you played with your siblings or some toys. Maybe you played video games, watched movies, or had some treats. Anything like that. And then there's a little bulleted list on the right of all the different things that you have to remember when you are writing a paragraph. So the first one is that your first sentence should be indented. Remember that you do that by pressing tab. Your paragraph should have at least 4 sentences. You need to stretch each one to add details. So I always think of it this way. Whoever's reading your story should be able to almost imagine that they were there. So if you had a special dinner or something with your family, you can say who was there, maybe what you had to eat, what your favorite thing was, your favorite part of the meal, anything like that. Brutus agrees. He's here with me. Then it says to try to use some type of figurative language. So remember that similes are when you're comparing two things using like as fast as a rabbit. A metaphor is when you're comparing two things, but you don't use those two words, like she is a doll. And then, my favorite is onomatopoeia. Those sound words might be great to put in there, especially if maybe like you were playing a video game and there were some sound effects, or maybe the sound of you opening some plastic eggs if the Easter Bunny brought you some, anything like that. And then our vocabulary words. So I've decided not to do a vocabulary word of the week because I didn't want it to be too much, but we definitely can't forget to use them when we can. And I'll also add in a list of them so you have them just as a little reminder. And then over here in red, it says you cannot get a 4 if you have not done all of these things on the right. So make sure you kind of use that as a checklist. If I were you, after you've written, I would go back in and just almost like check off each one to make sure that you've used it. So now that you've read through all of these things, you're going to click on that third slide, and that's where you're going to write it. So you can, for your title, you can make it the same title as the main slide, How I Spent My Spring Break, or you can make it something that's specific to you. So it could be maybe you went on like an Easter egg hunt in your yard, or a game that you played a lot. I know that I spent a lot of time with my family, so I might just call mine family time. And then just like I did with my name, the very first letters of those important words are going to be capitalized. Then where it says click to add text, you'll click there. Start by clicking that tab button to indent, and then start to write about what you did. So a good way to start might be my spring break was, and then you can fill in the blank. Was awesome, was great, was boring, maybe. Anything that kind of fits. So I might say my spring break mine was pretty relaxing. So that's my first sentence. I indented. So now the rest of my sentences would kind of go along with that. So I might say, I spent a lot of time with my family. Now I'll talk about the different things that we did together. We watched tons of movies. We made popcorn. I just mean I didn't put it in the microwave. We used the popcorn maker, which always makes it a little more special. We watched tons of movies. We popped homemade popcorn. And what else did we do? And we did a lot of yard work, which my kids probably wouldn't be too excited about, but it made me feel good. And we did a lot of yard work. So now that I talked about that yard work, I might go back to that. So I might say, I planted some flowers. I raked leaves. And the boys, my kids Cameron and Caden, helped by bringing the trash cans, because we filled up the trash cans with all those leaves and sticks and things, down to, I keep messing up, to the curb. So that's how I'm starting. So now I'm just going to go back and start to see if I included the things that I needed to include. So I'm going to just double check. Was my first sentence indented? Yes, it was. My paragraph should have at least 4 sentences. I'm not done yet, but I'm going to just start to count just to get an idea of how many I have already, so I know how many I also need to add. My spring break was relaxing. So I stopped, so I need to put a punctuation mark. 1, 2, I spent a lot of time with my family. We watched tons of movies. We popped homemade popcorn, and we did a lot of yard work. That was 3. I planted some flowers, raked leaves. So that's 4. So just because I have 4, I'm not going to stop it there because it would just kind of end. So I actually think I'm going to talk about some of the movies that we watched. We watched Abominable. If you guys haven't seen it, it's super adorable. Littlefoot, which is actually kind of a similar movie. What was the other one we watched? Oh, I think, is it called Rango? And Rango. So then my last sentence is going to be my conclusion sentence, which is going to kind of sum everything up. So I might say, it was great to be able to spend so much quality time with my family. Exclamation point. So I actually have like 6 sentences. So just because you have 4, please don't stop. Now let's just go back to our checklist. I know that I indented. I have more than 4 sentences, and then it says I need to stretch each one to add details. So that's what I did when I included like the different movies that we watched, the different ways we did yard work. The next one says try to use some type of figurative language. I did not do that yet. So now I need to go back and see where I can add it in. So let's see. My spring break was relaxing. I spent a lot of time with my family. We watched tons of movies. We popped homemade popcorn. And we did a lot of yard work. I planted some flowers. Oh, I can put one in here. Because I always think it's kind of easy to use, like describing words. So I'm going to say I planted some flowers. I'm going to talk about how the yard looked. The yard was as clean as a whistle. So that's an expression, but also includes a simile because it has as in there. So I have one. I could even add some others. But the last one that I need to make sure I do is use some vocabulary words. And the first one I thought of was the word massive because our yard work was a big job because we have a really big yard. So I'm going to say we watched tons of movies. We popped homemade popcorn and we did a lot of yard work. So instead of saying a lot, I'm going to change that and say we did a massive amount of yard work. So see how just adding those couple things in makes it a little bit more interesting to read. So I'm going to reread the whole thing, and then you will be off to do your own. So my title again was Family Time. I changed that. My spring break was relaxing. I spent a lot of time with my family. We watched tons of movies, we popped homemade popcorn, and we did a massive amount of yard work. I planted some flowers, I raked leaves, and the boys helped by bringing the trash cans down to the curb. The yard was as clean as a whistle. We watched Abominable, Littlefoot, and Rango. It was great to be able to spend so much quality time with my family. So now I think I'm all set. So that's what your job is going to be for writing. And then for reading, our reading response, I'm actually not going to be reading to you today, which is different because I decided that I really wanted to get to the end because of Winn-Dixie. So some of you asked if we could read the last 2 chapters, or I'm not sure how many are left, the last few chapters. And I'm going to be honest, I was holding off because I really wanted to read that when we got back together as a class, but I don't know if we are or when we are. So I decided that I didn't want to wait any longer. So I'm going to continue with because of Winn-Dixie. So instead of reading with you first, there's a lot that we want to just kind of remember about the book. So I started by putting your job in the middle. So it says, type what you remember from the last chapter or chapters of Winn-Dixie. If you don't remember a lot, it's okay, because we will have 17 other student summaries as well, so we can make sure that we read those. So it says to be sure to check back here and read what everyone else has added to help refresh your memory. Together, we will catch ourselves up so that we can read the remainder of the book starting tomorrow. So again, you might not remember everything that happened. Some of you probably have been waiting, so you remember exactly where we are. So if you remember exactly where we left off, just summarize that last chapter as much as you can remember. If not, you can just talk about any other important parts of the book, maybe how Opal got Winn-Dixie and just kind of different things, funny things that Winn-Dixie does and the people that she's met. You can describe the characters. There's a lot of really great and interesting characters in the book. Don't forget about those Dewberry boys. And then you can pick one of these, but then I also want you to make a prediction. I think the most important part, though, is that you go back maybe towards the end of the day, even if you did this first thing in the morning, and just go back and reread what your friends have written, because it will help you to just kind of get caught up so that we're ready to start on the next chapter tomorrow. All right. I can't wait to see what you guys do. Missed you all.